Hello, and welcome to East Africa NGO Podcast. I am your host, Patrick Hill. This program is sponsored by Team in Faith, supporting women, orphans, and vulnerable children in Uganda and elsewhere in East Africa since 2012. Today, I want to introduce you to Pastor John Ramey, president of Aslan Child Rescue Ministries. For more than 30 years, John has worked with teams on the ground across 4 continents and the Middle East, supporting Christian workers, women, and children in difficult and far-off places. I recently had a conversation with John about his work and travels and breakthroughs in Ethiopia. Joining me now from his home in Sacramento is John Ramey from Aslan Child Rescue Ministries. John, very nice to see you today.
Thanks, Pat. Great to see you again.
You are operating in so many parts of the world right now, Aslan. You're in Asia, Africa, Europe, North America, and the Middle East. It's just incredible what you've accomplished in your several decades there. That's so much ground to cover. How do you manage to do all that, John?
Our big footprints are India, Ethiopia, Mali, Niger, Northern Nigeria, Burkina Faso. We have amazing things going on in Burkina Faso. And of course, like you said, in the Middle East, Jordan, we have schools there. We have a great school in Lebanon, amazing school called Good Shepherd School. I could talk about them a long time. We have great projects in Egypt, and also we are in Syria. We're back in Syria now. Things have opened up for our team to go from Jordan into Syria. Isn't that hard to go? Like 2 or 3 hours, and they're there and working. There's still several thousand people, many thousands of people. Remember the earthquake about a year and a half ago, that hit several cities in Turkey. So in Syria, there's still people homeless in the streets from that. And so we go and we try to do what we can. We find trusted local partners, and we don't micromanage. We believe in them. We've vetted them over time, and we have every confidence in them, and they are doing tremendous work, and we believe in them and work through them.
I know you're very busy in Africa as well. You've told me that you just returned from a trip in Ethiopia. And of course, Africa and East Africa, very close to my heart. How did that recent trip go?
Thank you. I've been going to Ethiopia for many years. What was unique about this trip is that the Shashamani prison opened up to us. We have 2 young men that serve ministering in the prison to the needs of the prisoners and their families. And they knew me from previous trips and invited me to come with them into the prison to meet the staff of the prison and to meet those working among the prisoners. And this was a highlight of really of my life, to get into that prison. And now it looks like the other 7 prisons in Ethiopia are also going to open up to us. Not that we're going to be able to answer all the need, but it's an exciting new opportunity for us.
What did you see there among the men and the faces and when you were in the prison?
Well, the most surprising thing at the beginning was I found the commander. They don't use the word warden or chief, but they called him the commander and the vice commander of the prison. Were both very compassionate men, very concerned for the welfare of their men. 2,600 men at that prison and only about 100 women in a separate area. They're very compassionate, and they were very happy that we came, that we showed an interest, and they wanted to tell us about some special needs. Unfortunately, because their budget is minimal from the government, all they can do is pay their staff and provide very basic food. And so any extras, they just don't have any resources for. And so they saw us coming, and they know what we do is try to provide humanitarian help. And so they asked us for several things, which I can detail if you'd like.
Well, sure, I'd like to hear about that. And the first thing that comes to my mind is if there's anyone who needs humanitarian relationships, who needs any sort of fellowship with another, it's got to be people in prison.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And we found unusual. I didn't know that such a thing would exist, but they took us to another area of the prison where there are 90 children living. They don't live with their father, but they live separately in the prison because, of course, they said these 2,600 men have many more than 90 children, but these 90 children have no family at all on the outside to care for them. So they allow them to live within the prison grounds. And they're very concerned for these children, for their future. And they asked us if we would help construct a playground, a play area, for them. They have room. So we want to do that. And then also they have some unfinished, rooms that we want to finish a few of these rooms and make them classrooms. And if they have finished rooms, the government will provide school teachers to come into the prison, and so these kids can have an education. So we're very excited about that. And then the third thing they told us about was, unfortunately, many of the men are languishing. They're far beyond what their term really calls for, because they're not able to make their court appearances in Addis. Addis Ababa, the capital, is about 200 kilometers away. But if the family doesn't have the money to pay for the guard to transport them to Addis, they will just sit in prison. And he said some of these men have been here 5-10 years past when they should be here, but they can't show up in court. And so I said, what do you want to do about that? And they said, if we had a video conferencing capacity here in one of the rooms, then they could appear in court remotely. And so, of course, we thought, well, that's got to be done. That's a no-brainer. We got to find the money to do that. They have very good Wi-Fi in the area. They have 5G Wi-Fi, so that's not the problem. They just don't have the money to buy the computers and whatever's needed. So these are the three things we want to do: finish the rooms so they can have a school, provide a playground, and set up the remote conferencing capacity.
Yeah, that sounds very doable. If it's just in need of a couple of laptops or machines in the prison to get that done, that the playground and the school for these children really sounds wonderful. And my question is, are they aware that the children are there? Do they have any opportunity to see their children at all, or are they just kept strictly separated from them?
The way I understand it, if the men are, not a problem, then they let them see their kids. I don't know if it's every day. I don't know the detail of that. But there were women there with the children. I met the children. I talked to them. Our team played with them a little bit, and there were women there taking care of them. And I will get more information. When we go back. We're planning to go back soon as we get the money together for the playground. Well, we want to start with the playground and get that done. And then as we do that, of course, we'll get more information.
Following Aslan as I do, I know that working with women and children is very close to your heart and to the mission of Aslan. You have another trip coming up, I think you told me, in Jordan, and that's a common theme of your trips there to the Middle East, is to help women and children.
Yes, I go back to Jordan in the middle of June. This time it'll be a gathering of young leaders from 10 or 11 Arab nations to strategize on being of help in many different practical ways to the people in their nation. Also in Jordan, Aslan has quite a footprint providing both schools for Syrian refugee children and also a lot of medical work. We call them medical camps, where just even yesterday, 3 of our doctors were in a remote area in the desert where Syrian refugee families live in tents and work in farms, but it's remote and they don't often get any medical help. So our team went out there and had a wonderful day with them, giving medicine and giving help, and so there's a lot going on. The Syrian war is now 15 years back, and some of these people have been living, in Jordan since that time, and life is not easy for these refugees. So there's a lot of organizations like ours, thankfully, that are involved. We try to find pockets of people that no one else is working with.
When you minister to them, do you see the appreciation? Is it abundant? Is it immediate? Are they shocked to see you from America there? Or of course you're surrounded by others who are locals, but it must be incredibly heartwarming if they do relate to you their joy there.
Yeah, Pat, it's very rewarding. I think the fountain of youth is serving people. And it's interesting, psychologically, the more self-focused a person is, the higher his misery index is. So the way to deal with your own misery is to help other people. And we call that in Christianity, seeking first the kingdom of God, taking responsibility for some problem in the world. And so we have great people in the Middle East. We have a Palestinian and her brother that work full time. You know them for us, and they're very smart, street smart, as well as very, very compassionate. That's a good combination. And so, yes, it's very rewarding helping these families.
So the network that you have built over the years with your colleagues and associates and trainers and others, they provide the local language for you so you can get deep into these communities, and then they'll be translating for you, and then you can share what is on your heart. They'll relay that to them, but then they're giving you the feedback from the people back and forth. That seems to be most important for your mission.
Yeah, Pat. Well, most of the work is done by locals. Again, back to our core thing of working through nationals. So even the doctors that I mentioned that worked yesterday with Syrian refugees, they have lived long enough in Jordan. They now speak Arabic, so they're communicating directly with people. Of course, when I go, or people that I might bring, you've been with me before, we use translators. And we do what we can to care and understand people, but the magic is really in the heart language. And our team there, they're out almost every day interacting with people and following up with people. And it's there's a lot to do, but if we each did something, then it's good.
One of the things I think about in your work, John, is all of the things you've seen in all of these countries. You must have some remarkable memories and thoughts about, miracles that you've seen just right then and there on the spot. So can you help us understand if you have a story or two of just some incredible thing that has stayed in your mind, that has really shown the glory of the Holy Spirit over your work there?
When you just pay attention to someone, when you just listen, reminding them they're not forgotten and they are important. But yes, we see a lot of answers to prayer. I think maybe when you work with populations that have such limited resources, that it does affect the way you, like you may not be able to get people the medical care that you would get for them if they lived here in the West. And so you have a dependency on God that is very profound. We need God's hand to be stretched out for people, and we have seen many answers to prayer. I mean, we keep a record of what we call miracles, and we so far this year we have had 7. That I don't have my notes here right now, but that we are calling, miracles, in the sense that it was an impossible situation. All we could do is pray with the people, pray for the people. Even today, every Monday, we communicate by Zoom, our Aslan teams. And there was a Syrian man named Abdullah that a couple of weeks ago, when the report came in, we found out he was very violent to his wife and to his children. And we found out about it, and someone went to see him, trying to get close to him to find out what we could do. And of course, here we would go to Child Protective Services, and he would be removed from the family, or the children from him. But we're not. It's a whole different universe out there. And so instead, we all decided just to focus prayer on him, and we did. And he actually agreed to come to a church, which he had never been in a church his entire life. And it affected him deeply, just going in and talking to the people and being welcomed, and people greeting him and people being kind to him. And he said that he expected to be treated very differently, not to be accepted and wanted. And his wife reports that this is already changing him. And so things like that we see quite a bit of. Sometimes we do have to try to rescue children and women from these very desperate situations, which is very complicated.
You've also been involved in some situations involving natural disasters and trauma relief and, earthquake relief, and providing foods and meals. Those seem to just pop up unannounced and really sort of require active and swift mobilization. But Aslan has done that many times.
Yeah. I think maybe what's unique about us is we're small. We're a small player, and we know a lot of people out there living in second and third world situations where there's a lot of need, and yes, natural disasters happen and so forth. But we don't have a difficult protocol. Like, people basically will call me or one of my board members and say, hey, something's happened. Can you help? And if we have resources, within minutes, the money's out there. We don't have, to go through committees and protocols, and we're happy about that. We have found too, interestingly, like even with the Syrian refugee story, we got involved like right away, and with a couple of schools, and then as they were doing well, Pastor Hytham was one of the people that we helped at the beginning, and then as these projects do well, the bigger boys, the Tear Fund and World Vision and Caritas and the World Bank, World Food Bank, the big boys come in and they see something that's going well, and they will adopt it and take it to a bigger level. And we're kind of like we've been like a fire starter that way. And I'm very happy with that.
Yeah. Well, you may have heard recently in Uganda and in Kenya, there were some horrific rains and floods that have just wiped out communities, because you've seen the homes. They're just mudded homes, and when the torrents of water come down hillsides, it obliterates everything, and there's just nothing left. And it's just heartbreaking to see. And I'm sure you've responded to those in the past, just as Team of Faith has tried to do. But it's just incredible the type of misery that these people, like you mentioned the misery index, but the misery in just daily activities is just remarkable,
Yeah, and
given these areas.
that's Pat. That's an interesting fix. I know about this. I first started hearing about a lot of rain that comes in when I was in Mauritania years ago, soaks the mud houses, the earthen houses, and they just collapse. And if it's in the night and your family's sleeping inside, it's terrible. But all you have to do is, and it isn't that expensive. And from our perspective, you just have to put a thin coat of cement, plaster cement on the outside to deflect the rain. So like for $50 a house, you can keep it from ever falling down again. And we've done a lot of that. But of course, $50 when your income is $2 or $3 a day, you're never going to get $50 to fix your house properly. And so that's a fix we do. We've done a lot of that in different countries, and that's really fun. And you come into a community and, you find the worst houses and you just say, we're going to fix your house. And like, what? It's like, you're a rock star then in that community.
Yeah. And kiln fired bricks can hold up a lot better than these
Right.
mudded homes.
There you go. Yes.
So when you head out on your trips and you come back, how do you sort of release the tension, the fatigue of your travels and trips, and get ready for the next one? Because in your case, there's always the next trip, and that seems, at least from my perspective, to be a challenge to do that again and again. But you love to do it because you've been doing it for so long and so continuously. How do you refresh yourself, John?
Well, let me just back up and say one of my heroes is Mother Teresa. And after Mother Teresa died, which ironically was the same day that Princess Diana died, and Princess Diana got 99% of the press, and that really, I wish it would have gone to Mother Teresa. But I heard a talk by the priest that was the leader of the group of nuns that Mother Teresa was in when she was doing her novitiate, when she was in the process of being accepted as a nun. And he followed her life. And when I heard him speak, he was almost 100 years old. But it was fascinating what he said about her. When she was 37, she experienced the call within the call. She started out as a school teacher in Calcutta, India. She taught there for many years and became the headmistress of the Loretta School for Girls. I visited that school. It was for middle and upper class Indian girls. She had a very comfortable life. But then when she was 37, many people know the story, Jesus Christ appeared to her and gave her this other calling to leave that life and live among the poor and be Christ to them. And what this priest said was fascinating to me. He said at the beginning, when she first came to us, we didn't think she could find the candles, which is a Catholic way of saying she wasn't remarkable at all. He said when Jesus called her at 37 to this other life, she totally changed. And he said everything was in that call. And I've never forgotten that comment. And I believe in that deeply, Pat. And so, like in reference to me, when people ask me, how do I do what I do? And it is true. I look into a lot of misery. I look into the abyss. Right now, we are shocked because we've gotten some new research about the incidence of sexual abuse in India. It's so massive. It's almost unbelievable, but the research is there. And we have, teams in India, 3 teams in India where we know we have to try to address this more. We're writing a book about it right now called Bad Touch, Good Touch. And we're going to print that in all the major languages for India. But that's an example of how do you deal with this abyss of darkness? But I'm saying if God calls you to this, there's grace for it. And that would be my testimony. And I always ask when people say, how do you do what you do? I right away say to them, well, how do you do what you do? Because I couldn't do what you do. But you have a grace for your life like I do for mine. And so I would say that, not to make it super spiritual, I do have to take care of myself. I do ask a friend of mine who's a psychiatrist and one of my best friends to debrief me when I come back. My wife is great at helping me process what I see. And so that's how I would answer that.
And there's one more thing. I've seen you working with your son to tear apart houses, rehabilitate houses, paint houses,
Right.
all that work. And sometimes that hard work is a perfect antidote for the type of emotional and spiritual thing that, you or any of us go through, but good, hard physical labor. And I've seen you guys do that. And that's a good antidote too.
Yes, I agree. When you build something or do something in construction, you can look back and see it wasn't there in the morning and now it's there. And sometimes when you work with people, you don't see that. And so that is a help.
John, for people who might be listening who are trying to discern a call, they may want to work for the Lord. They may want to go out into the world and help people. What should come first? Should their desire to work with the Lord, or should they wait for God's anointing on them? Is there any sort of step by step how someone can determine if this path to help others, put others before themselves and put the Lord as well before themselves? Is there any way that they can sort of understand that this is a true calling for me?
Well, we need to talk for hours about this question. I will just say a couple things about it. The mantra for many years now is this whole mantra of safety. I can pretty much bet my house anywhere I go and talk. People will come up and, well, is it safe? Is it safe? And I heard a line years ago that I've never forgotten that says, the tragedy of life is not what we suffer, it's what we miss. And the reason people miss is because they're thinking about what they might suffer. And so they don't take the risk. They don't go look at something more deeply. They don't go anywhere. They don't open up their horizon because they're afraid. Oh, it's different. It's different. Well, this might happen to me. Is it safe? Those people, I don't understand them. I can't talk to them. Whatever it is, people get fixated on comfort. And to me, this is a great tragedy. Because again, back to the calling, if God calls you to something, there's no better place to be than in that calling. No one can secure their life in this world anyway. That's a ruse. We're in God's hands wherever we are. And so I would say that. And then I would also say just a philosophy of life, like, the Lord Jesus, when he taught on anxiety, it's such a different take on anxiety. It's incredible what he says. When he says, why do you worry about what you're going to eat, what you're going to drink, what you're going to wear? And, these are three of the six main needs of life. We need to eat, we need to drink, we need our body to process it so we have energy, so we need physical health, we need community, we need shelter, which is both clothing and place to live. We need community, we need touch, we need an intimate relationship. These are all things that God made us to need. So why is he saying, why do you worry about them? But he's talking about the kind of worry that makes these the be all and the end all of life. And then he asked that great question, is not your life more than these things? And that is the question. And then after that, he says, seek first the kingdom of God. Take responsibility for some problem in the world that presents itself to you. Take responsibility for it. Do something about it. And then he says, all these things, they'll be repeated in your life. Like, don't worry, God will look after. And that's the testimony, not only of me, that's your testimony, Pat. That's anybody's testimony that gets involved in this way in the world. You know, God's going to look after you. He does. But he's calling us to a higher life. Like, and I would say you got to have that mentality. Like, okay, why am I here? And what's my purpose? And not being afraid, not just seeking that, that security. And exposure is great. I would say, get exposed to what's out there. Now with the internet, that you can find out about the world all over the place, online. And if you have an opportunity to go, if you have a friend, most people have a friend who's in missionary work, some place in the world, say, hey, could I come and visit you? Many people, their life takes a new direction because they visited someplace. It's been the beginning of a, different way of getting involved.
Yeah, that certainly rings true for me. It was after my careers in television and civil service that I found myself traveling to Africa and fell in love with it. And I remember years into it having a conversation with you, and I was spending more time back in the States than I was in East Africa, Uganda, than I had been. And you said, and I've never forgotten this, anybody can do that. Anybody can work for a baseball team like I'm doing now. Anybody can park cars. Anybody can bag groceries. Not everybody can do Africa.
Right.
And that has really resonated with me because I can do Africa, and it's something I think about all the time. And it's like, why aren't I over there right now? Well, there's been a couple of complications with a 6-year-old daughter, and there are either complications with a 6-year-old daughter and a wife, or they're excuses. But either way, it's sort of preventing me right now. But it ain't over. It ain't over. We're going over. We'll be over there again later this year.
And back to Mother Theresa, one of her famous lines is when she was, her story, there's certain stories that I think if people became aware of, they're very helpful too in this idea of discerning your call. And certainly there are good biographies of Mother Theresa out there that people could read. And her father was murdered by a rival politician when she was 8 years old. He was poisoned. And it threw the family. The family was very wealthy up until then, but it threw them into poverty. And her mother became a cleaning lady in the houses of her friends that she used to have tea parties with. And it changed the family in so many ways. But her de facto father was her Catholic priest, a Polish priest named Jakovich. And he was a wonderful man. And they were the small Christian community in Skogie, Albania, among all the rest were Muslim population. And just this little church of like 30 people. But who knows, this pastor, that was his calling to shepherd that little Catholic church. But in that church, he gave the world Agnes, Mother Teresa. And she loved him. And he would read. He went to seminary with a bunch of guys that became Jesuit missionaries to Africa. And they would send him letters 3 or 4 times a year talking about their work among the poor. And he would read them with such passion to his little congregation. That's where Mother Teresa first got her love for the poor, was from the passion of her priest, reading about his friends that worked among them. And she made an appointment with him once. And she came in and she said, Father, I have something troubling me so much. And he became very worried. Oh no, what happened to her? Something terrible has happened. But then she said, how do I know God's will for my life? And he said, oh, I thought something terrible happened to you. I'm so glad you asked this question. This is the simplest question there is. Follow your joy. And that became one of her mantras, of course, for her whole. And she would talk about when she started to become famous, and people were coming from all over England and US to see her work in Calcutta. And she said, I would just send them out. I would just send them out in the morning, go find somebody and help them, help the poor in some way. And she said they'd all come back and they were all exhausted and they were all depleted emotionally. But she said, those who had the call, they also had the joy. And she said, these are the ones that I asked to join us.
That is great.
So,
That is great.
The exhaustion is real, Pat. We're all going to pour out our lives for something or somebody, some organization. If you'd have stayed in sports broadcasting, you would pour out your life incrementally until you're done. We all give our life for something. And, so the exhaustion is real. And working in some of these places, it takes an extra toll upon you. But the joy is there and it's real.
That was Pastor John Ramey, president of Aslan Child Rescue Ministries. If you would like to learn more about Aslan, visit the website at aslanchildrescue.org. That's Aslan, A-S-L-A-N. You can make a donation at the website using PayPal or Zelle. You can also contact John on the website and learn about upcoming trips and how you might share God's love with those who need it most. You can learn more about Team in Faith and support our programs at teaminfaith.org. Thanks for listening today. I'll be back again soon to introduce you to another individual and organization that is helping our brothers and sisters in East Africa. For East Africa NGO, I'm Patrick Hill.